So hello and welcome back to the channel. So we'll continue our series about Node.js with TypeScript, and I believe this is the right time to introduce you to how to build your own very simple API. And we will not use any kind of library or framework like Express or Nest.js or GraphQL or Apollo, anything like that. Basically, GraphQL isn't a library or framework, it's a different type of API compared to REST, but I'm start to ramble. So we'll only use Node.js with TypeScript to build a simple API. And maybe in the next episode, I will show you how to connect React to an API. Be minded that it will not contain many of the features that you often see with a real API. And two first things that come to mind when we're talking about this is authorization and use of the database. I will try to put very, very simple, and we'll introduce this concept later, probably when building API with Express or Nest.js. We'll use the game list JSON file as a way to store our data, and we'll use the file operations connected to it to manipulate the data. So basically, aim for that video is to show you how to build the simple API, how those hypertext transfer protocol known as the HTTP works, and how you can connect to your API from a web browser or from some kind of API testing tool. Okay, so let's get to it. First thing that we need actually is another module from Node, and this module is called HTTP. Okay, and it's used to create the server. From here, I will use two things: the create server method and request listener type. This is type a method, and I can basically get rid of, oh, we're in the wrong file, never mind. Now I will get rid of all of that since it's not needed, and if I call create server, you can see that it actually expects us to pass a function that adheres to the request listener interface. And what does a request listener does, takes a request object and a response object and manipulates them. And you can imagine this being very simple. Just open a paint because it's a great tool, right? Concept is really, really simple. Imagine this. Can you rotate that? I'm a king of paint. Okay, so this basically is your client, and a client can be any kind of an external app, a mobile app, web app, terminal application, basically anything outside of your server that can connect to your server. And this is gonna be our server, of course. And then we have a request, where the client describes what kind of data you would like to receive from a server, or create on a server, or delete from a server, right? And server takes a request, changes somehow its internal state, meaning manipulating some data, adding an entry to a database, maybe authorizing a user, and then sends a response. Okay, so you can see this is a two-way manipulation where we, creating a server right now, we're responsible for listening to a request and changing our game list JSON file somehow, and then sending a response back to a client after resolving that request. And of course, there's stuff like handling errors and so on. Okay, so seeing all this, we know that we have to create a function that takes request and response. Okay, okay, so this is gonna be our request listener. It's gonna be of type request listener, and since I'm specifying a type here, if I write a request response here, this should by default have the proper types. This is of type incoming message, and this is of type server response. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay, and if we receive any request, we can send a message back to the client. For example, let's say hello from the server, and we can pass that here, the request listener, and tell our server to listen on a given port. Okay, and you might wonder, what the hell is port? Okay, so this could be a good and simple analogy, but it's not 100% precise. If you imagine that your computer, your PC or Mac or whatever, is a country, stay with me on this, then the ports are the points of entry to your country. Like, for example, in Poland, we have many countries, in Gdańsk, in Gdynia, then also in Szczecin, and probably in other places, even small ports all over. And the port is a place where someone can basically access some kind of program running on your computer, right? So what I'm saying here is I'm creating a server on my computer, and it can be accessed by a port, via entry identified by this number. Okay? And if we run this, then suddenly we'll run a server on a local host, being on our own computer, right? On that port, and the other app, for example, the app that we also create on our own computer, can access that server on that number. Okay, so let's see how that goes. So what do we want to do here? I believe it should be npm start, if I remember that correctly. Yeah, no information here, but don't you worry. I can go to 127.0.1, this address of my computer in my network, right? It's always your home address. type it, it always points back to your own machine. And then after colon, you can go to the port created, and it should render a message that you see here, right? And if I go to the network tab right here and reload, will show that document here with a text. Okay, so looks good, but this is the basic of creating and running a server, which is important, of course, but this isn't really the core of what we like to achieve here, because basically there's a naming client and server, but the client is requesting and somehow controlling what is happening server, right? So you can imagine it like the client is giving the orders to do stuff to a server. In our case, one of the orders would be to return the full list of games we have right here. Okay, and we can achieve this by using two things, the method and the URL. So when you go to the HTTP protocol, you will see, let me check this. Should have heard that, but go to Wikipedia. Yeah, so here you can find the methods, and there are a few. We will be interested in get, post, patch, and delete. So these all map one by one to the CRUD operations I was talking about in the previous episode. So the C in CRUD stands for create, and in HTTP this is post method, which is used to create some kind of entry on the server. Then there's read, and in HTTP this get method. Then you have the update. This can be patch or put, and they do differ because when you'd like to update something, you have put and patch, and put is when you'd like to replace something, completely replace one object with another, while the patch is being used where, for example, you already have an entry of given kind and you'd like to manipulate one of its properties. So for example, our case, if I'd like to change the name of that entry, I would use a patch because I'm only changing one or more properties, but not the whole object. Whereas where I would like to replace the whole entry, I would use a put method to maybe replace the hand with, I don't know, Dead Cells game, right? So that's your difference. And then there's the URL, which stands for Unified Resource Location, I believe. And this is a string that is describing some kind of resource on my server, okay? For us, this URL will be only one, games, right? But if I would have many different resources, for example, players, users, leaderboards, games, some kind of statistics, that would all live in under a different URL, meaning under different so-called location. Okay, and I'm rambling for 15 minutes. Okay, you should get to the code, but it's all important. And don't get me wrong, this location can be like the real folder with real files, right? That you can access on the server, just like you have folders on your computer, and they also do have the address on your computer. But this can also be just like virtual separation of concept, right? When you say, if you'd like to access this resource, you have to use that URL. Okay? With all that out of the way, I believe I've given enough information to actually start coding. So there are a few things that I would like to check on the request object. And that's going to be the URL, so the address, the location that I mentioned, and the method of the HTTP request. So that's going to be get, post, put, delete, and so on. And then we have the. So the simplest example is the URL is matching games, and the method is matching get. I would like to return the list of the games. Okay, so I will introduce another layer between our file operations and our request listener that is able to take the data from the file operations, meaning from the game list JSON file, and shape it so that it fits our server and client needs. Now I'll call it controller, and you can imagine this being similar to the model view controller concept pattern that you know, but for me it's gonna be just a name, right? We're not doing MVC here, not really. Okay, so we'll create get game list function, and let's see, it will only receive the server response here because that's all we need for that case. We'll get the list of our games from getAll method from file operations, but since we're using await here, we have to mark it async, of course. And then, since we already have the list of our games, we would like to send it to the server. First thing we're gonna do is to use method writeHead, which allows you to manipulate the header of the HTTP response. And you can read all about it, I believe, in the very same article, like with server responses and whatnot. Basically, you know that all job 404 not found. This is an error code, like you can find here, right? Basically, 200 means everything went good. 201 means we created a resource and everything went good. Others, codes from range of 300 to 199 are about the redirection. So given resource that you're looking for was moved to a different location and we will redirect you. From the 4 to 499, these status codes are errors, but these are client errors, meaning you as a client did something wrong. For example, you sent up wrong credentials and you can log in, right? So whenever you see an error with, I don't know, wrong password or something like that. That should be something like 400 bad request error. And then the 500 internal server, maybe you've seen that, mean the developers of the server did something wrong and you triggered an error that couldn't be handled nicely on server. Okay, going back. I assume this is where everything went good. And here we have to specify another thing. This is the content type, right? Meaning everything went good. I will send you some data, and this is the type of that data, because it can be HTML, it can be XML, it can be plain text. We will, of course, and you should always default when building an API, we will default the application JSON, mean this is a JSON string. Okay, and then you just call and with JSON stringify, you have to stringify your answer. We're not sending plain JavaScript objects here. We're sending a JSON string. Okay, that's really important. So with all that out of the way, I should mark this as async, and I can just call await get game list with the response. Okay, good. Yeah, we'll get an error here because I have to switch my NVM 14.16.0. My day-to-day project at work, we're using different Node version because reasons. Try it now. Okay, nothing's broken, looking good. So now if I go to here, I will still get the same answer. But now I know that if I will add an URL here, matching URL I specified here, I should get a games list. And I do. Okay, so this is the base of our server, the basics. I asked for a given resource living in a given URL, and I asked right here to get it, to receive it. And therefore, in my client, this is being a browser, I received that response from the server. And now I can use it, for example, in React to render some kind of UI. Moving on. Okay, so since I can get a list, and this is very good, the other thing I would like to receive is just one given game identified by an ID. So if I will send something with ID of Hunt or Cyberpunk, I would like to receive only that object. Okay, good. Moving on. So this will be a little bit tricky because I imagine my URL now to look something like games, I don't know, Hunt. But this can be fixed, right? Because someone else can request for Cyberpunk or EFT. So I have to match my URL, my string, with some kind of pattern, right? And we can do that by using regex. And there's a method called match to match given regexp, regular expression, okay? So I can match my string to something I would imagine look like games and any given set of characters, right? And you don't have to know this, and I believe the myth is that no developer actually know this, but it will look, I have this on second screen because there's no way I'm gonna remember that. That doesn't look good to me. And I'm definitely not going match. Let's see. Games, this and that. And now this is all wrong. Would be this. Yeah, now it should be good. So terminated regular expression. Now it's good. Okay. So put that again. This is the regular expression to match this string, right? When W plus stands for any given set of characters. Okay, so it will match all of our IDs. And of course, I'd like to check whether the method is also get, because here I'd like to receive only one resource. And from that string, right? So for example, from games EFT, I would like to get only that EFT part, right? That parameter. So what I can do is split that. Let me show that in a console. I can take that string and I can split it a separator that I know we're using for URL. Right? And I can see it being split in three parts. But if I access the second index, and the third part, I will get my ID of the game, right? So combining that, I can just say ID is URL split and give me that second index. That should be my ID. Okay. And you can call our get game. Well, get game is fine with response, and ID, and not the game list. Create that still. So going to my controller, I will create get game function. This is going to be asynchronous function with the server response and ID being a string. And this is going to be actually interesting because we have to find the game, get by ID, by the ID. And here are two cases. We can find in game, or someone might have made a typo or forgot the name of the game and sent an ID that does not exist yet in our game list JSON file. And this is the case of error done by a client that we should inform the client about. And this is a great case for a 404 error being not found, right? So if the game wasn't found, I will write to the head information about the error. And this is of course gonna be typing. And then we can send a message like, let's say JSON stringify error. Let's do game with ID was not okay. And let's try that. We have to import that. Okay. Let's try that. Let's try asking for a game that we know does not exist. So that's going to be games, let's say, dead cells. And we get hello from a server, which is not what I wanted. And this is because because of this. And there's no game with ID that sells. Right. It's correct, but it into a int. I don't think it does. What if we wrap it? Try catch and rerun it. Oh, this is bad. Error originated from. Oh, I know why. I think I know. Yeah, we have to get rid of throwing that error for the file operations. Now it should be good to go. We're throwing an error here, handled properly. Try again. Like I'm doing something wrong. Server is running. This path might be a blessing because I can introduce you because of this problem. I can introduce another tool that will help us test our solution. So if you go to the extension tab in Visual Studio Code, you can search for ThunderClient. I already have installed. After you install this, you can switch to a ThunderClient here. And here you can run requests. Like I can, for example, run a get to a given URL and get my response. And now I should be able to test my error. And it actually stuck. If by ID is something wrong, right? Nothing. Okay, what about that? Arm. Let's first a handle being stuck. Okay, so because maybe my URL is wrong. So if we don't match any URL, I would just write 404 with content in JSON and then just error page. Okay, let's try it again. Nothing. Okay, this works. That. Let me ID here. Okay. So that might be a problem somewhere here. This again. So work. Then oh, of course. Jesus, for fuck's sake. Of course it should be awaited because otherwise we're just returning a promise. Oh, kill me. Okay, let's try again. So yeah, don't stress about it. Programming is cool. Really good for your stress and nerves. So here in you can find the headers and the proper content type is being set. Also, you get the status. So this is what I will use in the future to test the API. Very neat. It's integrated into Visual Studio Code. Very easy to switch stuff and add other headers, body. We'll that just in a second. Okay, back to business. Of course, if we find the game, that, and get rid of that. We will to the content type of application JSON, and we'll send given game, so JSON string game, and we can test this by asking for a game that does exist. It works like a charm. Okay, so these were the requests we can do that are, well, let's say non-intrusive. They don't change our game list JSON file. So now let's try actually writing a request that will create an entry in our file. So, and this you're seeing here is the basics of routing, meaning taking given method and given URL and deciding what to do on server based on that. Of course, it's not so, let's say, so beautiful and well for that, because what we're doing here is stupid if else. And in stuff like NestJS or Express, we'll have a proper router that is handling all of that with a better syntax. But as I mentioned before, we're using only NodeJS here. So let's actually add another route here. So we'll match the very same thing as in first request games, but here we'll check for the different method type being a post method, and basically close this and give this else. Okay, so here we will await create game with the request. Basically, I would like to change this. Yeah, let's change this just so it's clearer. Actually, that. Okay. I don't want to create just its fragment. I want to create a game. Here I have to pass request and response. This is being awaited, so that's good. Go to our controller. And this is going to be a little bit harder, because what we have to do here, say that this incoming message and the response is server response. Now, user wants to create some kind of resource on a server, and what he will do is he will send us information about what he'd like to create on a server, and that information, that text data, is being stored on a request body. So if you go to here, as I used earlier, I have a body with JSON content with the name of the game, its ID, and its price, right? And I would like to add this to my game list JSON. And I need a way to read this content from the request into my JavaScript, into my TypeScript server code. Okay, so I'll say that new game data is being taken from the request, and I will create a helper function called get data from request. And I will pass a request here. And let's create a new file and call it utils.ts, of course. And here I will write a simple function to read the data from the request. This is gonna take a request, which is incoming message. Okay. And this is, well, not so funny part, because as I mentioned before, there's a lot of APIs in Node.js that are still running on callback functions. And I don't really like that, and most of the developers don't, because we are accustomed to things like promises and async await syntax. Yet here, reading from the request body is working with the callback API, and we have to promissify it, change it to a promise. So let's see how we can do that. We will return new promise, fix request and resolve. Resolve and reject, of course. So this is when everything goes smoothly. This is for any kind of errors. And we'll try to read the request body and catch any error that might have happened, and we'll just reject the error. Okay, so the data that you're reading from the request is a string. Remember, we're sending a string back as a response. We're using JSON stringify, and also the data is given to us also as a string, and we have to transform it to JSON. So request object has a listener on a given event. I mentioned also that Node.js is event driven. So on data, there's going to be a data part because it can come in chunks, meaning not all data can be read in one piece in one time. So it can be chunked, sliced, and then we have to bring it back together into one final piece. And I will just append my empty string what we got from the data event. So that's going to be data part to string, just in case. Okay. And then, because that also might be a buffer, I would have to check that, but it's out of the scope. Then we wait on the request to end, meaning all data from the request is already read. Okay. And then we will resolve our promise, meaning we'll finish it and return the result value as JSON parse body. Okay, so JSON stringify changes the JavaScript object or an array to a string, and parse, well, goes the other way around. It takes the string and returns array or an object. But I will cast it here, thanks to the power of the wonderful TypeScript, just to know its type. And this interface is defined here, so we have to export it. Come on. Okay, you don't want to help me. It all by myself. Okay. This should be good. And therefore, the return type of this shouldn't be promise unknown. We know what will be returned here is definitely game, right? So if we get that, now here we have a game object, what I really wanted. Okay, so now there's a matter of creating that entry in our file. It's gonna be just simple add new game data and then inform the user about the success. So we'll write ahead, and we could use 200 OK. It's fine, but there's a better status code, 201, sorry, which means a resource created, meaning you successfully created some kind of entry, some kind of content on the server. And then we'll just return, but it's ending the function either way. JSON stringify will send back the new game data. Maybe it's of some use. Okay, good. So let's see where that works. I will go to my ThunderClient and I will create an entry. It can be satisfactory, or we can create that sells game. That sells with price of something. Let's send that. There's an error, cannot find create game. Oh yeah. Sir? Oh, this is create game. Yeah. Let's get it from here. Good. Let's try running it again. Yeah, now it works. I can see it being added to my file. It's here. And of course, additionally, if I will request the list of our games right now, I'll get 4. So this is how we can create some kind of entry on our server. There are 2 more things to do, and this is updating the game and deleting the game. And this is going for over almost an hour. So let's speed things up. This is going to be similar, what we know already. What we have to do is to add our else if statement. And here we'll check for the URL, but we'll check for patch method. And this is going to be information that someone would like to update given game. We'll take the ID and we'll call update game with request help the game request response and ID. Okay, going to our controller. Maybe more of the same. Okay, and now what we'd like to do is to get the game. So this is going to be get by ID again. If there is no game, we'll do the same as before, right? And else, more interesting, we'll get the name, ID, and the price by reading data from the request. We already got that function, so that's good. And then we'll create the object, the updated object that we'd like to save. So let's create game data to save. And we don't really know which parts of the object user would like to update, right? But we can create this with something like this. This basically states the new name value, the name read from the data request, and if there's none, maybe someone just sent an ID or price, right? Then get the old value, meaning the same that it was here already in our file, okay? Then there's a price, which is same, and the ID. Well, technically in the really APIs you don't update the ID, but let's just go with the flow here. And we'll call update game. Thankfully, we already have that written. Our file operations, game data to save, and we'll write at 200 content is gonna be application JSON, and we will send, well, maybe the updated game, because why not? Okay, fine. Let's just import that from command controller. Good. Yeah, let's try that. So we'll change our method to patch. Good. Then say we'd like to patch FT, and in the body as a JSON. On the JSON, I will send new price being 83 and new ID escape from Tarkov. And let's see what happens. Okay. Oh, something. Let's see. Changed. Actually, oh no, it does update. One question though. At wrong tab. Where is it? Doesn't come through. Oh, because that does not return anything. Just send that back. Try this again. Now it's good. Okay. Now it's working. Okay, cool. Cool. Only thing that's left for us to do is to handle the list scenario. Okay? It's gonna be rather similar. Let's do that and that. It's gonna be the same URL where you have an ID, but the method is gonna be delete, right? So we have to this, and this is an ID. Then we have to delete the game with the need request. Basically, no, I believe all we need is a response and ID pass here. In our controller, we don't need that. And in our controller, all we have to do is our function called delete game. There's gonna be a response. There's gonna be an ID. Let's go over that one again. Basically, the beginning is the very same. We'll search for a game to delete. There's none. Returning 404, right? And then I would like, after someone deletes a game, what may be of use to him is the updated list, the list of the game that's left after the delete, right? So let's see, do you have anything about that here? No, but what we can do is just return games from here, these games after filtration, whereas this is being deleting, right? Because we write the file here. Okay, so that is going to be removed by ID with an ID. And then all we need to do is to say that everything went smoothly. That's it, right? So we check whether a given game exists. If not, we send the 404 error. If it does, delete from the list, and we send the updated list back to the client. Makes sense. Let's see. Let's delete something. Let's delete wait, this wrong some patch. Try this again. Right after end. Date. Okay. Being added instead of being updated. Wrong. Update. All right, because of course I can't update if I can't update the ID because it will be a different game. Change name. Have to pass the left the ID out. Okay, get rid of that, and let's try that again. Put it work. Yeah, second here. Can be read from the request ID. because you shouldn't be able to change. Okay. So let's see, it should work now. So um fix a token. Still expected. Oh, problem as an ID. Okay, wrote it like this. But no, it's been replaced here. Look. It again. Yeah, okay. Now it works as expected. Whew. A bit of stressor. Let's see the deletion, right? So we'll try to delete the space cyberpunk. So now it has cyberpunk at the top. And if we send it, error. Right after end. Delete. Error is in S48. Get here. Oh, okay. Now it works. And as you can see, Cyberpunk was deleted. And it took us only 1 hour and 10 minutes. So there you have it. This is your basic router for your API. Data is being stored and updated in a JSON file in retained memory. And here is your controller to handle all of the communication and changing of the file. And next episode, I hope I can show you how to properly debug Node.js application and maybe how to connect it to React. So that's all from me. Sorry for the hiccups along the way, but development in a sense. Please like, subscribe, comment, see what other subjects you'd like to see on the channel. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.